People, welcome to Newspaper Breakdown, 30th of November, end of the month, so good times for us all. I hope everyone is. We'll start with the news from yesterday, which was about the census. We spoke about it yesterday, it went through all of the facts and figures on it. What we've seen over the past 24 hours is the racists come out, and you see them all, the Douglas Murrays and Nigel Farages, that fucking Calvin Robinson, whatever his fucking thing. You see the bigotry as it seeps through into popular culture. And as I mentioned yesterday, it was very interesting with how they did the figures, where even in like the Guardian, it was 55 million drop in number of Christians, 44% rise in number of people following Islam. See how that's written? You see how they've done that? Because the 5.5 million drop, 44% rise. It's a big rise. Oh, they're coming for us. Wow, look behind you. There's a Muslim. Run away. The fact is, what you've got, it is 9.3% Asian British, 6.5% of everyone in this country is Muslim, which is up from 4.8%. So when they go along and go 44% rise, it's 6.5%. That's the number, and this is what they do when it's a low number and it's a rise. They can use the big numbers to show percentage. You go, mate, you've gone from fucking 2 to 3. You can go a 50% rise, massive rise, absolutely massive rise, massive, huge. It's one of the reasons why, if you look at like the G7 and everything, and you hear from our government, hey, I tell you, we have risen more than anyone else. Yeah, but it's a smaller size. You shit a lot. You went down a lot, and then it's easier to have a big number when you rise. It's the reason why African nations, or like China when it was growing, you see the percentages every year that they were rising. It's because it's going small to big. That's why it's such a high percentage. Where if you actually put the number in, it wouldn't scare everyone, and you wouldn't be able to use it as easily as the likes of Douglas Murray, Nigel Farage, and everything use these numbers as an attempt to push hate and keep everyone against each other and produce fear. I want to talk about this country especially, and people coming over here, and they're not white British or anything else anymore. Look at our history. We've been invaded by millions of people. Our entire being is a fuck ton of everything else, for Christ's sake. Right, for the news that I actually wanted to go through, we'll start in the US. It's always fun. The New York mayor, Eric Adams, announced a major push to remove people with severe, untreated mental illness from the city streets and subways. He will do this through the medium of involuntary hospitalization. People who were in danger to themselves, even if they pose no threat to others. So they're going to start hospitalizing involuntarily people with mental illness, and the people who are going to decide if you're mentally ill are the fucking police. I'm not sure if you've noticed the police over in America, but they may have to start arresting themselves, because I think if you're going along and you're so happy with the guns and you keep on shooting and murdering people, you may be mentally fucking ill. The police will decide, with officials in New York say that they will be rolling out training immediately to police officers, emergency medical staff, and other medical personnel to ensure compassionate care. Now, you and I both know that's bollocks. Every time you hear compassion from anyone in politics, you should automatically think, fuck me, there's going to be no compassion here. Secondly, training for the police, who seemingly get tons of training for lots of stuff and they seem to constantly ignore it. Or maybe the stuff they're being trained on requires a bit more time. Because medical professionals, years I hear, years, absolutely years of training. But what we're going to do is we're going to give police, who already are trained to do so much other stuff that they're bad at, are going to be trained to go, right, I wonder what medical fucking issue you've got. Ridiculous. Over in the UK, Health Secretary Stephen Barclay and his department have been slapped down by the UK Statistics Authority, which is the UK's statistics watchdog, for a misleading graph that exaggerates increases in nurses' pay. This is a continuation that we see over and over and over and over and over and over again with everyone who strikes. Nurses are now the villain. Nurses are the villain because they're striking, because they're not being treated well and they're not being paid fairly. And actually, if you have a look at what the continual spoke of increases in their pay is, if you take it into real terms, they've got a pay cut. I tell you who hasn't got a pay cut: MPs. But of course, that's all independent, isn't it? That is from an independent watchdog. And not once has anyone suggested that maybe we get the independent watchdog that every fucking year, without fail, tells us that the MPs need a pay rise. Maybe they should look at fucking nurses and see how much of a pay rise they fucking require. That should be it. If we have this independent watchdog that is able to look at MPs and say they need a pay rise, can't we get them to look at everywhere else and say, well, they need a pay rise, maybe the fear is that this independent watchdog would go along and say, fuck me, right, you need 50% rise, you need fucking 60% rise, you need 30% rise. This is it, they're the villains. So nurses are now villains alongside rail workers, postal workers, anyone who strikes, anyone who says a bad word about the country, anyone who, when they cut themselves, doesn't fucking bleed white and red. Officials working for the Health Secretary posted a chart on Twitter, apparently showing how nurses' pay has gone up. But the UK Statistics Authority boss, Robert Chort, condemned the poor and misleading representation of the data, saying it risked damaging public confidence in official statistics too late. There's no trust to be found in UK politics. They all lie. His criticism included how one side of the graph starts at around 20,000 instead of 0. So the chart starts at 20,000, which means that it makes it look more than it is. It exaggerates the proportional increase in pay. Also, the freehand way in which the lines have been drawn appeared to have been drawn suggesting a bigger relative increase in pay for newly qualified nurses. The underlining data does not justify that. It's just another example that always be wary of anything that the government does, because the government, although the government is meant to be there to improve the country, they're there to stay in power. That's it. And not give anything else out. Not help anyone. They're never there to help. What we've got, the next news story is the BBC has broke its own impartiality rules last year after a viewer complained that a programme on reporting Scotland presented an unbalanced view on the impact of Brexit. The BBC's Executive Complaints Unit ruled that the report should have reflected areas where impact had been less negative. it's the only way you would have found the other side, the positive side of Brexit, is if you went to the hedge funds that have made money for trading against the UK. That's where you'd have to look. For the rest of it, there isn't a benefit. That's the fucking point of Brexit. And this consideration of impartiality, it's balance. And the BBC have a severely fucking mad look when it comes to balance, because it's consistently 1-to-1. And that isn't balance. That is not balance. You're going along going, I'd see this fucker's murdered, but at least they don't have to wear those shoes anymore. It's madness. Every fucking step the BBC is taking at the moment is madness, and it's there to stop the right wing crying. That's it. Because the BBC have to do their best to make it seem that they're that they're impartial. But being impartial and ignoring facts are not the same thing. If the BBC continue to ignore facts, that's not impartiality. What that is that siding with those who want to ignore the facts, which tend to be the fucking government. And the BBC are constantly scared that the government's going to take away more money from the BBC. They're going to take away more money from the BBC because BBC are more trusted than the government, aren't they? Well, though, you have a look at everyone in the head of the BBC Trust, you'll notice that a lot of them actually have connections with the Tories, which is something that the BBC impartiality seems to fucking forget to mention for some reason. Who knows? Who fucking knows? Who could have thought it? Finally, ministers are considering relaxing the ring fencing regulations brought in after the 2008 financial crash to stabilise the banking system. This particular ring fencing that was brought in requires lenders to separate their high street operations from their other activities such as investment banking or international operations. The government are doing this. They're looking to get rid of the ring fencing as an attempt to deregulate the city, which is always going to be fun. That's the reason that we got into the 2008 mess in the first place, because Labour did too much deregulation, which allowed banks and whatnot to do their own thing. And if you've ever met rich people, they should never be fucking allowed to do such a thing, should they? Because you allow them to do what they want, and they fucking will do. So they're looking to deregulate the city and spark a second big bang for the financial services after Brexit, because at the moment, Brexit isn't going well. I'm not sure if anyone's noticed such a thing, but it really isn't going well. So what the government are doing is trying to find ways to make it go better, and that is by removing all of the rules that put us in some form of Wild West, especially in the financial sector, because one of the reasons that London was the financial hub of the world was because of our closeness to Europe and America. We were a wonderful middle ground where English speaking, but we had access to all the European markets because we were in the EU. That's gone, which means that with the regulation, the connections and everything, it's actually easier to use somewhere like Paris. With this removal of the ring fencing, largest banks would still be ring fenced, but smaller would not be. Banks have been forced to hold more capital to allow to absorb future potential losses in other operations. These regulations were brought in an attempt to stop any future public bailout. If you remember, in 2008, what we did is we brought the banks. You can argue whether or not that was a good thing to do. Or not just let them die, but that's what we did. So we did that, And what we don't want is for it to happen again. So we forced banks to make sure that they had kept more capital behind them, so that if something ever did happen with their more exotic sides, their higher risk parts of their business, the investment side, all the other operations, international operations or whatnot, if they're ever hit, the banks will still have the money with them to be able to protect themselves. So, but ministers are looking to get rid of that, because why? There could have been potentially a good part of Brexit. But the main issue that you face is the fact that everyone who wanted it is a fucking idiot. And they're the ones who are in charge moving us forward. And you can't have fucking idiots do anything productive because they're incapable of it. So, right, well, that's it for today. I will catch you later. Thanks, bye.